Lovely. Just like to welcome you all to Resources Board this evening on 25th of January 2021. We're obviously online and not all in the chamber together, which is probably beneficial this evening given the snow and the weather outside. Although here in the chamber we've got the team ensuring that we're able to broadcast online properly for everybody. So just to go through the agenda, I won't go through the evacuation procedure given that you're all in your own homes. Do we have any apologies for absence? I believe we have Jane Farrow.
Yes, Councillor Farrow, that's anyone we've had.
And that's it. Okay, moving on to disclosable pecuniary and non-pecuniary interests. Do I have any of those this evening?
Yes. Yes, Chairman. I have one, but it's in the confidential part of the agenda. Would you like to take my non-pecuniary interest then, as a member of the Atherstone Town Council?
We can do that at that point, but I note that you've said that you've got an interest there. Thank you. Okay, moving on to number 4, minutes of Resources Board held on the 9th of November 2020. As they've already been through full council, I don't think there's a huge value in going through those page by page this evening. So if there's any points that anybody wanted to raise as a result of those minutes, then here's your opportunity. I have deathly silence and no hands up, so we'll move on to agenda item 5, public participation. I can't see that I've got any members of the public in, and I've received no questions in advance of the meeting. So we'll move on there to agenda item number 6, general fund fees and charges for 2021-22. Okay. Just trying to get to the right part of my book. So, general fund fees and charges for 21-22. Just a recommendation to the board this evening that the schedule of fees set out in the report are accepted. Do I have any questions on agenda item number 6?
I'll move that, Chair.
I've got Mark Simpson with his hand up, so I'll just take that question. But thank you to Councillor Humphreys.
It was to do what he's just done, so I'll second it, Chairman.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Deakin, I have a question.
Thank you, Chair. Just to inform you that the Labour Group will be abstaining on the majority of the budgetary items, just to inform you that.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Deakin. So I've got a proposal from Councillor Humphreys and a second from Councillor Simpson for agenda item 6. Do we need, so just to go to Steve Maxey, do I need to do a roll call vote for that one?
Yes, I'm happy to do that for you, Chair, if that helps. So Councillor Chambers.
Abstain.
Councillor Davey.
For.
Councillor Deakin.
Abstain.
Councillor Dervix.
Abstain.
Councillor Hayfield.
For.
Councillor Humphreys.
For.
Councillor Simpson.
For.
Councillor Singh. Do we have Councillor Singh?
I have seen him this evening, so let's have a...
The remaining councillor is Councillor Simmons.
4.
Councillor Singh, final time.
4.
Thank you. So that's carried, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. So that's moving on to agenda item number 7, a general fund revenue estimates 2021-22 for services recharged across all boards. Okay, so the recommendation to the board this evening is to accept the revised budget for 2021 and to accept or otherwise vary the estimates of expenditure for 2021-22 as submitted, for them to be included in the budget to be brought before the meeting of the Executive Board on the 15th of February. Do I have any questions about agenda item 7? If not, I will propose that from the chair. Do I have
I'll
Happy
second
to
it.
second.
Thank you, Councillor Davey. Moving on then to,
Sorry, Chair, we'll just take
do I
the
need
vote.
to do a roll call vote on that one as well? Okay, thank you.
Yes, please. So Councillor Chambers,
Abstain.
Councillor Davey,
For.
Councillor Deakin,
Abstain.
Councillor Dervix,
Abstain.
Councillor Hayfield,
For.
Councillor Humphreys,
4.
Councillor Simpson,
For.
Councillor Singh,
For.
and Councillor Simmons.
4.
That's carried,
I think
Chair.
that's
Thank you.
carried. Thank you, Mr. Maxey. Moving on to agenda item 8, the general fund revenue estimates 2021-22 of services remaining within the board. So the recommendation to the board this evening is to accept the revised budget for 2021 and to accept or otherwise vary the estimates of the expenditure to be brought before the meeting again on the 15th of February. Any questions on that? Councillor Chambers.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I have a general question about 2021 and the next year that lies ahead in terms of the money that we've received from government for both the extra costs of the COVID-19 pandemic as well as the loss of income. And I was really looking to see whether there was a balance in terms of, if you like, the costs that we've incurred and the grants that we've been getting. And I struggled as I moved through the different descriptions of each item to understand how much we were still, in a sense, owing or being owed or having to pick up from our own resources the expenditure this year and next for COVID-19. I realise the whole kind of situation is in flux, but it might be helpful if Sue was able to explain exactly how if you were to draw up a table of income from COVID-19 grants and extra expenditure, as well as loss of income that we've had to compensate for. I can't get an overall picture right now in terms of whether we've taken a big hit or not.
Okay, thank you. I've got Sue with me here as Director of Finance, so I'll ask her to just give you an update on that.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Could I suggest perhaps could we take this under the next item? The next item is actually talking about the overall summary for the general fund, and then I can refer to some of the figures within the report if that's acceptable.
Yes,
Would that be okay for you,
sorry,
Councillor Chambers?
I thought we were on item 8. I'm sorry, I've jumped the gun.
No, sorry, that's item 9, actually, but that would be covered under.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yeah, fine.
So if we go for if I propose this from the chair and let's have a second.
I'll second it.
Councillor Singh. So if we do a roll call on this agenda item 8, I'll hand over to
Thank
Mr.
you, Chair.
Maxey.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Chambers,
Abstain.
Councillor Davey,
For.
Councillor Deakin,
Abstain.
Councillor Dervix,
Abstain.
Councillor Hayfield,
For.
Councillor Humphreys,
4.
Councillor Simpson,
For.
Councillor Singh,
For.
and Councillor Simmons.
4.
That's carried, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Maxey. So moving on to agenda item 9, which is the general fund revenue estimates for 2021-22 in summary, the summary of those estimates. So hopefully we can deal with Councillor Chambers' question in this section. The recommendations to the board on this item are that the following items be recommended to Executive Board for consideration in setting the council tax for the Borough Council. So the revised budget for 2020-2021, and to approve the schedule of expenditure requirements totalling 8.7 million for 2021-22. Okay, so do I have any questions regarding agenda item 9, or would we like to go straight to the question you previously asked, Councillor Chambers, with Sue Garner? You take that first.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, apologies to Councillor Chambers and the rest of the board if it's not very clear, but it has proved to be quite a complex issue of trying to pull together the additional costs for COVID and also the additional grant funding that we've received. Certainly, I will try and make this clearer when we get to Executive Board and we look at the overall report. In general terms, we've received, if you like, an unring-fenced grant of over £1 million, which we've used to support some of the services where we've had additional costs. An example of that is given in refuse and recycling in the paragraph that relates to that. We are, members may be aware, able to claim some of the lost income that we haven't been able to achieve. The government scheme, unfortunately, doesn't allow us to claim all of it back. We can claim around 75%. And again, where we have been able to claim grant then, or where we expect to be able to claim grant, because clearly we don't know the end year position as yet, then we've included an estimate of income within. This report is very much looking at it on a service basis, if you like, and trying to look at the impact on different services, which is why I'm afraid it's not perhaps as clear as it could be around the additional costs and the additional income. But as a rough rule of thumb, you'll see from the budget requirement at 3.1 that we have assumed the use of earmarked reserves of just under £442,000 in 2021. So that gives you some indication of the additional costs that we are picking up as a result of the additional expenditure incurred this year. There have been a few other variances, but a large part of that does relate then to additional COVID expenditure or lost income. I think that's probably, I'm hoping that will have answered some of your question, but I'm happy to try and expand further if you'd like some more information, Councillor Chambers.
Councillor Chambers, does that answer your question, or would you like to ask any further questions? You're muted, Councillor Chambers.
Oh. Yeah, I always seem to get this wrong. Yeah, sorry, so it wasn't implied as a criticism of your paper. It was just trying to get an overview, and what you've said is helpful. I think it would be helpful to have that sort of summary table as best you can get it, so that we can see to what extent, in a sense, we've had to pick up the extra costs of COVID ourselves as an authority, and in particular in relation to this current financial year, or the one that's about to start, to get, you know, a sense of how much we think we're going to continue to have to pick that up in whatever estimates you're making for the budget. And again, you know, I know it's a best guess, but I do think it's important that we understand the extent to which we, as an organisation, are being supported by government or not during this, well, what looks like it's going to be 18 months.
Thank you for that, Councillor Chambers. Are there any other questions with regard to agenda item 9? If not, I will move that from the chair. Do I have a second?
Happy to second.
Thank you, Councillor Davey. I'll move to the roll call on that. Mr. Maxey.
Councillor Chambers,
Abstain.
Councillor Davey,
For.
Councillor Deakin,
Abstain.
Councillor Dervix,
Abstain.
Councillor Hayfield,
For.
Councillor Humphreys,
For.
Councillor Simpson,
For.
Councillor Singh,
For.
and Councillor Simmons.
For.
That's carried, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Maxey. Moving on then to agenda item 10, the county-wide homelessness strategy. As those of you who may have got printed documents, or those of you who are reading on your iPads, this is a really extensive document, a really thorough report issued by the county in partnership with the districts and boroughs. And obviously the recommendations to the board tonight is that we consider Appendix A and agree. Point B, that the strategic vision and recommendations within the strategy be agreed, and that the council supports the homelessness strategic group to develop an action plan underpinning these recommendations and continue to work towards preventing homelessness in 2021-22. I think that it's a really comprehensive report and actually follows on from a lot of the work that is currently done at North Warwickshire Borough Council, where we have taken a very, very proactive and preventative style of work with our own homelessness strategy. Obviously, this is a county-wide homeless strategy. So if there's any questions, I know that Angela is online for us to ask any questions if there are any questions arising out of the report. I have Councillor Dervix.
Thank you. It's not really a question. It's just to reiterate what you've said about North Warwickshire being proactive in this field, and I would like to compliment Angela on the work that she has been doing for some time in this field. I haven't been involved in any way in the county side of this, but I think that this is some work that we can be proud of supporting. So therefore, I would be inclined to recommend this to the board for support.
Thank you, Councillor Dervix. Did I hear a proposal in there? He's muted.
Yeah, I think you did, Chair.
I did.
I'd like to second and also support what's just been said about all the work. We had a paper, I think, last Resources Board,
Yes.
and it's really very good, all the work that's going on through Angela's leadership in this area and all the partnerships that she's involved with.
Just on that note, in terms of if there's any comment, Angela, if you like, would you want to make any comments about the report?
Thank you, Chair. No, I agree with that, taking credit for it, that it is a good piece of work. It sits very nicely with our work that we do locally, and really is going to make a big step forward in forging crucial partnerships to really prevent homelessness in the county.
Thank you. I'm just following on from that then, if I don't have any more hands up, I will move to the roll call. Mr. Maxey.
Thank you. Councillor Chambers. Councillor Chambers, I could lip read, but could you?
Froze there.
I try again. 4.
Thank you. Loud and clear. Thank you. Councillor Davey.
4.
Councillor Deakin.
4.
Councillor Dervix.
4.
Councillor Hayfield.
4.
Councillor Humphreys.
4.
Councillor Simpson.
4.
Councillor Singh.
4.
And Councillor Simmons.
4.
It's carried, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 11, which is the Hearts and Private Sector Shared Service. The recommendation to the Resources Board this evening is that the recommendation of the Heart Shared Service Review as set out in the report be agreed, and that the work undertaken by the Private Sector Housing Shared Service be noted. Do I have any questions on agenda item 11? Again, just to reiterate, this is another very thorough report. So we've had a lot of reading for this board meeting with some very, very good reports, actually. The Hearts Shared Service is actually a very thorough service, and that over the last 12 months has struggled a little bit due to COVID-19, but actually we're anticipating an improvement again in 2020, 2021. Councillor Chambers.
Yes, thank you, Chair. If Angela's still there, it would be helpful, I think, from my point of view, to know whether she has any concerns in terms of the future management and leadership of this service, and you know, whether she would like to air some of those, given the review that's gone on, whether we've got enough seniority. I see that we're going to have a consultancy coming in to help manage the change, and that always kind of flags up certain worries when I think, well, perhaps there's not enough seniority maybe in the existing team. So I'd just like Angela to comment on that, really, and any other concerns that she might have about what lies ahead.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Chambers. Angela, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I mean, as the report indicates at several points, it was always ambitious to bring the 5 districts and boroughs together with the county council to forge a brand new partnership and a contract. And I think the first couple or 3 years we sort of had some momentum in taking that forward, and then there have been some issues around systems of work, roles and responsibilities, which have caused extended waiting times. Satisfaction is good when a customer gets to the end of the service, but there has been some waiting times that are not satisfactory. And I would say that with the change of the chair of the Heart Board, some change of personnel with the host, and a very experienced consultant who's been working with the team now for about 4 months, I think we're starting to see some clarity about the issues and starting to put some of those improvements in place. We can't keep blaming it, but it is a factor. We are hampered a little bit by COVID because of restrictions on visiting. But the Heart team are allowed to have vaccines because they will be visiting vulnerable people. So that will help us this year to still forge forward and get the assessments done and get people the adaptations that they need. There's a way to go, but I'm confident that we're on a good roll now.
Thank you, Angela. Are there any other questions? Were you happy with that, Councillor Chambers?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so do I have a proposer or a second?
I'll propose.
Thank you, Councillor Singh.
Second.
Thank you, Councillor Davey. So if we move to the roll call on this recommendation, Mr. Maxey?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Chambers,
4.
Councillor Davey,
4.
Councillor Deakin,
4.
Councillor Dervix,
4.
Councillor Hayfield,
4.
Councillor Humphreys,
4.
Councillor Simpson,
4.
Councillor Singh,
4.
and Councillor Simmons.
4.
That's carried, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to item number 12, the housing revenue account estimates 2021-22 and the rent review. Obviously, it's the recommendation to the board this evening that we accept the revised estimates for 2020-21 and increase, obviously, the recommendations as listed in the report. Do I have any questions? Councillor Dervix.
Thank you. I'd like to ask a question about 5.5.1, which is on page 188, where it actually talks about us, if I can find it, 5.5. It says about debt management that an additional 250,000 of borrowing will be repaid in line with the schedule of debt repayments. Elsewhere, it actually says that we're going to be asking for £1 million of borrowing to support something else in the accounts. And what I'm not clear about is why paying back and borrowing an additional £250,000 somewhere else is going to be a better option than leaving that 250,000, which is a longer term borrowing, possibly. Is it cheaper? And if so, how much cheaper? What is the saving by doing it this way? Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. So we're saying, why are we repaying this to borrow more?
Yeah.
And actually, is there a benefit in doing that in terms of the interest rate?
And if so, how big an advantage is that? Okay.
I'm just going to pass across to Sue here to answer that question regarding that change in borrowing. If you just excuse me, I'll mute myself so that we don't hear us twice.
I'll do the same.
Yes, thank you, Chair. The debt that we're talking about in 5.5.1 is debt we took out some time ago, if you like, to buy ourselves out of the housing subsidy system. And at the time we took that debt out, we restructured to repay it at certain times. So, if you like, the increased repayment is just in line with what we had decided some years ago. We can't change that easily. But in actual fact, even if we could, I wouldn't be advising you to do that just at the moment, because we do have surplus funds within the authority, which I can get very little investment interest on at the moment. So in effect, it can be used as a cheap way of borrowing as a temporary measure. So I don't believe that this is an incorrect decision in that case, but as I say, it was laid out some time ago. The low interest rates we may as well take advantage of currently. So I think actually it's probably the most economic way to take on additional borrowing at the moment, if you like, is to do it internally.
Thank you. I assumed
that
was it, but it wasn't clear in my own mind whether that was actually the case with internally borrowing it and so on. But thank you for that answer.
Are there any other questions with regard to agenda item 12? Councillor Simpson.
Thank you, Chairman. It's along the lines of the question that Councillor Dervick's just asked. My question is section 11.3, and the final sentence says borrowing of 52 million will also have been repaid. Could we just have a little bit more information on the 52 million? It's great news to see the housing revenue account having a surplus of nearly 64 million, including the capital expenditure of 196 million. This is a really positive position, but I'd just like to understand a bit more about the 52 million debt.
Thank you, Councillor Simpson. I'll refer that to Sue again.
Yes, thank you, Chair. The £52 million was goes back to this buying us out of the housing subsidy system that I mentioned just a moment ago. That was some of the sum that we had to pay, and we restructured that debt over quite a period of time. Clearly, once we have paid that debt off, then we will have surplus income to take us forward into our 30-year business plan. But in the meantime, then we are repaying the debt so that the surplus isn't there temporarily. If we do need at some point to bring in additional expenditure, then clearly we can look at things like restructuring our borrowing to allow us to take on funds if we need to do that going forward, which we may well need to. Sorry, I'm not sure if that's given you sufficient information. Again, happy to add a bit more if needed.
It went a long way, Chairman. Thank you, Chairman. It certainly went a long way. Just a residual final question is, what is our overall in debt level as an authority? Because I know we had a chunk of debt. Where are we in the total scale of things? Because I see the HRA's got plus more or less 64 million. What's the rest of the authority? And are we plus or minus at the moment?
Thank you, Sue.
Yes, so our total borrowing is around £60 million in total. That's for both the general fund and the housing revenue account.
Are you okay with that, Councillor Simpson? Or maybe I should rephrase that question.
Well, yeah,
Does that answer your question? Does that answer your question, Councillor?
It certainly answers it, Chairman. I can't possibly pretend that I'm okay with a debt of 120,000 on the general, 120 million on the general fund. But it certainly is an answer. If I understood that properly, if it's 60 million net debt, taking into account 64 on the HRA, does that mean the general fund is 120 million in debt?
No, it doesn't. I'll let Sue answer that.
Sorry, Councillor Simpson. No, the debt for the council is 60 million, and that is both HRA and general fund together. The 60 million. That's the total debt of the council.
Now I'm confused, Chairman.
Sorry.
What he's doing is he's adding the plus 6.
Chairman, I'm sorry. I think I've worked it out, and what I think Mr. Garner is saying is at the end of 30 years there'll be a surplus. Not there is a surplus at the moment.
No, that's right.
Yeah, thank you. I
Sorry,
understand.
Councillor Simpson. Yes, absolutely right. Sorry for not being clearer.
At the end of the term, sorry. Yes, if we had a surplus now, we'd be in a slightly different situation.
Thank you.
Can I just make a comment here, Councillor Simpson, that in one of the other reports, and I can't remember which one it is, those figures are outlined somewhere else in the reports for today's meeting. But I can't remember where I saw it. It's buried somewhere there.
And thank you, Chairman. I'm grateful to you, to Mrs. Garner and to Councillor Dervix. You know, I do get numbers dyslexic, and I have to say, you're absolutely right. There's an awful lot of numbers on this agenda.
A lot of pages to read as well, so it's somewhat. Thank you all. So, are we okay with that if I move that to the vote? Have I got a proposer? If not, I'll propose that from the chair. I'm looking for a second.
I'll second, Chairman.
Councillor Simpson. And we move to the roll call. Mr. Maxey.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Chambers.
Abstain.
Councillor Davey.
For.
Councillor Deakin.
Abstain.
Councillor Dervix.
Abstain.
Councillor Hayfield.
For.
Councillor Humphreys.
For.
Councillor Simpson.
For.
Councillor Singh.
For.
And Councillor Simmons.
For.
That's carried, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Maxey. Moving on to agenda item number 13, Asset Management Plan and a Housing Maintenance Service. Obviously, this report has got recommendations to the board tonight about the current position of the Housing Asset Management Plan to be noted, and further requirements of the Social Housing White Paper to be considered, the requirement for major works programme to deal with roof repairs and defects at Council's block of flats at Alexandra Court, Abbey Green Court and Drayton Court, and that the introduction of a new role of trainee contract surveyor be considered and considered by special sub, and that the capital programme for 2021-22 be adjusted to reflect the priorities set out in the report. Do I have any questions on agenda item 13? As I have no hands up, I'll move that from the chair. Do I have a second?
Second, Chairman.
Happy to second.
Councillor Simpson, if we move to the roll call on agenda item 13, then Mr. Maxey.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. Councillor Chambers.
For.
Councillor Davey.
For.
Councillor Deakin.
For.
Councillor Dervix.
For.
Councillor Hayfield.
For.
Councillor Humphreys.
For.
Councillor Simpson.
For.
Councillor Singh.
For.
And Councillor Simmons.
For.
That's carried, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. And moving on to agenda item 14 and the capital programme 2020-2021 to 23-24. The recommendations of the board this evening are to support the changes of the revised capital programme, the schemes shown in Appendix A that have previously been approved in the 3-year programme, the growth bids included in the capital programme, and note that the schemes which will now not be included within the capital programme shown in Appendix B, and to support the proposed vehicle replacement schedule shown in Appendix C. Do I have any questions on agenda item 14? There's silence and no hands up, so I'll move that from the chair. So I have a second.
I'll second that, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Humphreys. I'll move into the roll call. Mr. Maxey?
Councillor Chambers.
Abstain.
Councillor Davey.
For.
Councillor Deakin.
Abstain.
Councillor Dervix.
Abstain.
Councillor Hayfield.
4.
Councillor Humphreys.
4.
Councillor Simpson.
4.
Councillor Singh. Councillor Singh.
4.
Thank you.
There he is.
Councillor Simmons.
4.
That's carried, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to agenda item number 15, the customer contact reception service. The report to the board, the recommendation this evening is that we approve the move to an appointment only reception service, reducing the staff establishment in line with section 5. This is a report obviously reflecting the reception service that we're doing at the moment by appointment and finding that it's working relatively well. I've got Councillor Chambers and Councillor Deakin with their hand up. I'll take Councillor Chambers first.
Thank you, Chair. I was a bit concerned, I have to say, when I read this. Quite a substantial reduction that's been in terms of savings, but very little in the way of an assessment of what impact these savings, particularly the removal of key staff, are going to be. I obviously appreciate that this year has given an opportunity to look at different ways of working, but in particular the impact on the telephone service, and as well as the continued need for visits to the reception area, which have continued through to certainly before the pandemic closure meant that there were far fewer. But if you look at the figures for 2019-20, we were still getting 19,800 visits to the reception area, which in my book is a small country A&E department. Now, I cannot believe that all those visits, there isn't still a need out there, even though COVID has stopped those visits by and large this year. And I also have concerns that the telephone contacts, there were 95,272 of that. This is our front line it's our interface with people out there. This is their first port of call. How they perceive the friendliness, accessibility and approachability of the council is directly through this customer care service. And I don't believe that we've had sufficient assessment of what the impact of these quite big reductions in revenue to this service will actually have. It's a bit of a wing and a prayer to say that, well, just because it's worked this year, then there's no need there. And I, for one, will be opposing this proposal.
Thank you, Councillor Chambers. Councillor Deakin.
Thank you. I just wish to inform the board that we will be pushing for a minority report on this recommendation after the board meeting has concluded. The Labour Group won't be supporting this recommendation either. Whilst we did feel that it was worthy of abstaining on budgetary items or items that potentially impact the budget, we feel that this item is not something that we can support in any aspect and in any circumstance, simply because of the impact that it will have on our customer services and front-facing team, and also the points that Councillor Chambers has raised about that first point of contact for many of our residents is something that we think is essential to keep out of all of the things that we might have to lose due to poor government finance. But for those reasons and others, we will be submitting this as a minority report and voting against it here today.
Thank you, Councillor Deakin. Councillor Chambers, you put your hand back up, or was that legacy hand?
It was a bit of a legacy hand, but I'm sure others want to join in the debate. But, one of the first things I did as a councillor when I first was elected was how friendly and approachable and helpful our customer contact experience is. And it wasn't just because I'd announced myself as Councillor Chambers, which I often didn't do. It was that point of entry, which frankly in many other public sector organisations you don't get that kind of responsiveness or helpfulness. And I worry that we are shooting ourselves in the foot potentially by taking out 84 grand out of this service. I cannot see how it can ever be the same if we do that.
Thank you. Do I have any other comments? What I would just like to add to that is I think one of the things that is in here is it's to move to an appointment only reception service. So that's not saying that we're not going to be seeing people or speaking to people or still delivering a very friendly front of house service. It's just by appointment. And I think one of the things that the last 9 months has shown us is that we can do things slightly differently and people are embracing technology. And actually the move to embrace technology has leapt and taken a real step forward in terms of booking an appointment and speaking to someone on a different platform as well as face to face. So I think that, you know, from my perspective, I'm quite content to receive the report and to give something like this a try. This isn't to say that we're so blinkered that if something doesn't work well that we can't revisit it and actually have a review. Any change to the way a service is delivered is actually important that there is a review. Councillor Simpson.
Thank you, Chairman. I mean, on one hand, I share the concerns of members about the friendliness and the openness of the service that we currently provide. But I think from my perspective, there are a few things to counterbalance that. Number one, as you said, is that we're still going to be having a face-to-face service. It's just appointments only. Number two, the report makes it fairly clear that the nature of the interventions and the nature of the way people come and talk to us has changed, and that it's materially different, and that's been over time and not just because of COVID. And I think number three is, you know, section 4, the impact on existing staff, where we're saying that currently there are 2 part-time vacancies in the team. And so it's not really going to make any difference to existing employees because we simply won't fill those 2 vacancies. So I'm not entirely sure what the real impact that is going to be so negative really is. It seems to me to be actually just recognising where we are and where we have been, notwithstanding COVID. So if you're proposing it, Chairman, I'm more than happy to second the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Simpson. If there aren't any further hands up or any further points to be made on that item, I'm happy to move to the roll call. Mr. Maxey.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Chambers.
Against.
Councillor Davey.
For.
Councillor Deakin.
Against.
Councillor Dervix.
Against.
Councillor Hayfield.
For.
Councillor Humphreys.
For.
Councillor Simpson.
For.
Councillor Singh.
For.
And Councillor Simmons.
For.
That's carried, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. And we move on to agenda item number 16, which is Treasury Management Strategy. The recommendation to the Council tonight is that the proposed strategies be approved. This is a recommendation from SIPFA, Institute of Public Finance and Accountancy, that we adopt the following words to define policies, etc. So I'm happy to move that from the chair if it's quite a technical one. If there are no other questions or hands up on this one.
I will second that.
Thank you, Councillor Singh. I move to the roll call. Mr. Maxey.
Thank you. Councillor Chambers.
Abstain.
Councillor Davey.
For.
Councillor Deakin.
Abstain.
Councillor Dervix.
Abstain.
Councillor Hayfield.
For.
Councillor Humphreys.
For.
Councillor Simpson.
For.
Councillor Singh.
For.
And Councillor Simmons.
For.
That's carried, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to agenda item number 17, the Sheepy Road Football Ground. The report that's come to council this evening is that the recommendation to the board is that we agree to enter a tenancy at will with Atherstone Town Community Football Club in respect to its use of Sheepy Road Football Ground, subject to the agreement of the terms by the Chairman and Vice Chairman of Resources and Community Environment Boards, and that the Head of Legal Services is granted authority to complete the necessary documentation. I have had a request that the local members are also invited to be involved in that conversation, so there might be a slight amendment to that recommendation. But if there are any questions, I've got Councillor Deakin and then Councillor Chambers with their hands up on this item.
Thank you. Yes, we will be supporting this item, and we're quite proud to, especially with the way that the local community around this issue came to, you know, we were all at that full council meeting. It was quite moving, actually, when members of the local community came to that full council meeting. So we will all be supporting this motion. We do have some concerns just around the length of the tenancy. I believe, sorry, I haven't got the, it's hard to flick virtually, but I know that Chambers has some of the specific points around this, but we will be voting for this recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Deakin. Councillor Chambers.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just to echo what Councillor Deakin has said in terms of principle, I think the main concern is that what is recommended is a tenancy at will for 12 months with quite a lot of caveats in terms of that tenancy. Having experience trying to apply for grants that are significant in terms of capital, you definitely need more than a tenancy at will to get any real substantive investment. They have to be either 10 years or 20 years. And I'd just like to be reassured that the football club itself is content to move down this road and ask what the plan is in terms of converting it from a tenancy at will into a much more substantive tenancy and lease agreement, such that they will be able to make use of it in terms of applying for grants, because at the moment it doesn't look like there's much gain for them. In fact, more that they're going to be picking up all the day-to-day costs of operating and maintaining it, which, you know, you could say, well, that's advantageous to the borough council, but what advantage does it give to the football club? And I think the spirit of the debate was that this is land that now can no longer be in the local plan. It's likely to be in a flood zone, or at least half of it is. So why can't we move quickly towards a more permanent investment, or rather lease arrangement, as we have done with other pieces of land where we've handed over that kind of tenancy, so that more substantive capital investment can be made.
Thank you, Councillor Chambers. I mean, obviously, what we're agreeing this evening is that we, as a board, are giving our approval, if we vote for this, that we can enter into those sort of negotiations. We can actually sit round the table and even propose a tenancy at will. At the moment, we don't have any of those permissions from this board, so obviously it's a starter position, and if things come back with different expectations, then we'll have to bring that back to this board. Councillor Dervix.
Thank you. I noticed that Jackie's got her hand up again. I don't know whether she wants to come back on what's just been said, but what I wanted to say really was that you mentioned the possibility of local members being involved with this as well, and I would like to see a recommendation in there that all of the local members are involved if they wish to be, that we are all given the opportunity, because it is a whole town interest. It's not just the members of where that is situated. I'm sure Councillor Singh would agree with me that it is important to the whole town, and I think we should be given the opportunity to be involved in those discussions if we wish to. We can always walk away from it if we're not interested, but I think that should be included as one of the recommendations. at the very least.
Thank you, Councillor Davies.
Perhaps Councillor Singh has got a view on that as well.
I have had a request that we amend the recommendation. I just need to look at what sort of it would appear like if we were to have half the board there with them, and whether or not that would seem to be a little bit. But I'm happy to sort of take the view that local members. I've got Councillor Steve Maxey would like to come in there.
Chairman, if it helps, one of the things we could say is that rather than subject to the agreement of the terms by the chairman and vice chairman, we could say subject to consultation with the chairman and vice chairman and local members, and then delegate that to the head of legal services to finalise it in effect. So if you're happy with that, you could have that as an amended form of words.
No, I would certainly be happy with that.
Yeah, that's fine.
So was that a proposal, Neil, on Councillor Dervix on that amended recommendation?
Sorry, I'm muted again. Yes.
I'll second that.
That was a second from Councillor Singh, but I've got Councillor Chambers with her hands up.
Yes, thank you, Chair. My question was really not directed at yourself, Chair, although you did address my question by saying it's okay, it's a good start. But I actually would like Richard to reassure, certainly me, that this tenancy at will for only 12 months, why have we ended up with something that is so limited? Is it going to bankrupt the football club because we're basically going to take a big hit in terms of maintenance? And is that what they want? And when do we expect to get going with a longer term lease agreement so that they can, in their forward planning, assume that they can start applying for longer term grants?
Thank you, Councillor Chambers. If I bring Richard Dobbs in on that one, maybe he can answer that for you.
Yeah, happy to, Chair. I mean, I'm happy to give Councillor the reassurance that this is as a result of discussions with the football club, and it's very much in their interest to get this tenancy at will agreed, because after the dissolution of the previous leaseholder, there is no formal agreement between the council and Atherton Town Community Football Club, and that's something obviously we want to get in place to allow them to continue to play at Sheepy Road. What we're proposing is that tenancy at will mirrors the arrangements under which they were already operating previously. So it's not going to put any new burdens on other than a sort of underlining of the need to comply with health and safety regulations and legislation, which I'm sure members will be happy to see. And those discussions about what the future looks like beyond the tenancy at will are already well underway, not just with Atherton Town Community Football Club, but with Sport England, the Football Foundation and others, because we very much realise and accept what Councillor Chambers said, that you need a longer term arrangement to be able to access some of that funding, and those discussions are already underway, Councillor, so I can give you those reassurances.
Thank you, Richard. Councillor Chambers, do you have anything further for Richard there?
Yes, well, no, thank you. That is reassuring. I think in all of this, it would be helpful to see some sort of timeline about when we expect this next stage, when they will be able to apply for bigger grants to come through. I haven't, since that debate in full council, really haven't seen any project plan or feedback or clear timeline of, the transition, if you like. And I'm glad we are where we are, but I don't want it to kind of slip into a position where a year on they're struggling, because I think that would be unfortunate. And although I accept your reassurances, Richard, I think it would be nice to know when they're going to be out the other side as far as having a lease agreement that will work in their best interests.
Thank you. Councillor Humphreys.
Looking at the tenant's obligation, it talks about maintenance and also landlord's obligation about maintenance. Will there be a sort of division between what's our responsibility and what's their responsibility? And the other thing I wanted to remind people of, this ground was owned by the club, and it failed. And when it failed badly, many years ago, the council stepped in to be able to keep it going, and the club then agreed that within a couple of years it would sort itself out. Well, that's 20 years ago, and they failed to do that. They've always been on a wing and a prayer, and I think we've got to do the best we can to try and to keep it going. And I do believe that the management that's there now is a much better management to take it forward. But they've had a history of failure and not actually being able to achieve
what their aspirations. And I think we can't ignore the fact that that's history, that exists. I just hope by starting off with an at-will agreement, they can get themselves sorted to the extent that they become viable, they keep working at it, they become a successful club, and then we could move on to a longer term issue. So I sound like a doubting Thomas. I actually want it to succeed, but the team that's running it needs to succeed. History says the various teams they've had have failed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Humphreys. I've got Councillor Ray Jarvis that wants to come in.
Thank you for allowing for me to speak, Chair. Just that I'm echoing what Councillor Humphreys said, really. But I went to the AGM some months ago, just right at the start of COVID, so I guess it was about March, April time. And the old club has gone, the old committee and that. The new committee are very, very proactive and we're making all the right moves to take this forwards. And I know I'm not part of this committee, but I think it's my duty, if you like, just to reassure that when I went to that meeting, I was pleasantly surprised of how forward-looking they are and that they do want it to succeed and they do want to work with the council. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Jarvis. Okay, I think that's all the hands that were up, so I'm happy to move to the roll call now because I had a proposer and a seconder of the amended recommendation, which were Councillor Dervix and Councillor Singh.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Chambers.
4.
Councillor Davey.
4.
Councillor Deakin.
4.
Councillor Dervix.
4.
Councillor Hayfield.
4.
Councillor Humphreys.
4.
Councillor Simpson.
Abstain.
Councillor Singh.
4.
And Councillor Simmons.
4.
That's carried, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we move on to agenda item 18, which is the exclusion of the public and the press. We have no public and hopefully we have no press. So I'll just read this. Under the section 100A of the Local Government Act 1972, the public and press be excluded from the meeting for the following items of business, on the grounds that it involves the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined by Schedule 12A to the Act. Agenda item 19, confidential extract of minutes of the Resources Board held on the 8th of September. Agenda item number 20, Borough Care Report. Agenda item number 21, adaptation of a property in Atherstone. Agenda item number 2, High Street, Coleshill. In relation to the items listed above, members should only exclude the public if the public interest in doing so outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information, giving their reasons as to why this is the case. Thank you. We will stop broadcasting now, so I'll put up my